All right. Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you today about resources for job searching, CPT, OPT, and beyond. We have brought together a lot of great folks here today. I'm so excited to introduce you to, but first, my name is Grace Fuller. I serve as the Manager of International Student Experience and Engagement at the International Students and Programs Office, also known as ISPO. And I'll hand it over to Emily and my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Everyone, I'm Emily Stewart. I also work with Grace at the International Students and Programs Office, and I'm one of the International Student Advisors in the office. We're really happy to have you all here today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Karen Dosher. I'm one of the Associate Directors at the Main Career Center on campus. My focus is on career coaching for international students. I'll turn it over to Megan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Trudeau. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services at the School of Global Policy and Strategy, and I help advise students who are seeking employment in the private sector. And with that comes a lot of work authorization needs. And so part of my role is also being the point person for international students at our school.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andres Lemons. I'm an immigration attorney at the Undocumented Student Services Center. So I mainly help the undocumented students with their immigration needs, getting work authorization and permanent residence and things like that.
So first of all, thank you so much to my colleagues for being here. As you can see, we've brought together quite a few people to hopefully make this as comprehensive as a workshop as possible. So a little bit about today, we just want to highlight a few really key helpful resources for you. We've put together a panel of questions of kind of like our most commonly asked questions when it comes to this topic. And then we'll dedicate a good amount of time today for your specific questions, because we know that sometimes you come to these workshops and you're like, okay, but like I also have this burning question. So we want to make sure that we'll get to that as well. But for our key resources, I will go ahead and hand it over to Emily.
Thanks. Yeah, so the one that I was going to highlight is actually a new resource on our ISPO website, so istudents.ucsd.edu. We actually have two maps. This is the employment map for OPT and STEM OPT and J1 academic training for UCSD students for the year 2020. So obviously this is just a slide, but if you go onto our website, it's an interactive map. So you can see where our students, our alumni were working last year on OPT and STEM OPT. And then there's also another map that we collaborated with the International Faculty and Scholar Office on, and that's a map of US employers that sponsored for H1Bs during 2020. And that's not just UCSD students, it's just all H1Bs, just to give you an idea. So definitely take a look at those as you're doing your job search, whether it's for before or after graduation. And then I'll hand it over to my colleague. Oh, sorry, briefly, yeah. And then another resource, iemployment.ucsd.edu. That's our main employment website. From there, you can get more information on OPT, CPT, STEM OPT.
All right, thanks, Emily. So I'll take over and talk about Handshake. Before I jump into that, I just want to mention that the job market today is highly competitive. So your job search strategy really should be proactive, disciplined, and also you should pull from a variety of resources. Handshake is just one resource that's available to students and alumni. And so really expand on how you use Handshake and how you use other resources as well as part of your job search. So I'm going to share my screen so we can take a look at some of the features in Handshake. All right, so the first thing I would recommend, if you haven't done this yet, is go to make an appointment with the Career Center. We have a lot of career coaches who are here to support you. The best time to see a career coach is way before your job search even starts. So when you first enroll at UCSD, freshman, or as a transfer student, that's a good time to meet with a career advisor. to kind of explore your options and get set up on the right path that will help you for your next steps beyond UCSD. It's not too late if this is perhaps spring semester of your senior year. That's okay. Come see us as soon as possible so that we can help you set goals and find the steps to achieve those goals. In addition to meeting with a career coach on Handshake, you can go to our events page. You can see what are some of the upcoming workshops, events, and career fairs that would be very useful as part of your job search. So we do events on topics like networking, on interviewing strategies, resumes, how to write a cover letter, lots of really good, useful workshops out there for you. So check that out as well. Another thing to look at is the career paths. So you can actually explore different industries, information about which are some big companies that are in the industry you're looking at. What's the sort of average salary range for the types of positions you're looking at? And what are some of the big cities across the US where people get hired into this field? Another thing to look at is looking for employers. So instead of just looking at job posts, we want to see what are some of the employers that you're really curious about, you're interested in working for, even if they don't have any open positions posted today. They may have something tomorrow, they may have something next week, next month, or they may have an open opportunity now that's not posted. So it's really great to have that list of sort of your dream companies where you want to work for. So looking through Handshake to find employers, you can kind of filter your search based on location, based on the type of work that you want to do, and learn about some companies that you're potentially interested in. In addition to that, so let's say you find some companies that you want to learn more about, you can actually go in and see, sorry, I just jumped out of it. You can actually see information about who are some UCSD alumni who work at those companies. So again, that's very useful for networking as part of your job search strategy, because you can learn from the people who actually work in these companies. What was their career path like? How did they get into this company? What advice do they have for somebody who's considering getting into that field as well? So really great to connect with people who work in these companies that you're interested in. And the other thing is, if you make those connections with people who work in that company, you may apply for a position in that company, let them know, because they might say, hey, send me your resume. I'll pass it on to the hiring manager. Now your resume is getting pulled to the top of the stack. So very useful to network as part of your job search strategy, and Handshake allows you to do that. One more piece that I wanted to mention is with the actual job search. Okay, my web browser is being funny now. Give me just a moment. Let me pull it back up. Okay, and so the last thing I want to talk about is how to use Handshake to search for jobs. Just a moment to pull it back up. Okay, sorry, because when I was sharing my screen, it popped out. So let me share my screen again so I can show you. Okay, so back to the main page. And so if we go into search jobs, searching for internships and full-time jobs, one thing that you want to pay attention to is the filters that you can put into the search. So you can search by keyword, search by location you're looking at, if you're looking for an internship or you're looking for full-time or part-time, if you want something on campus, but also go into the additional search filters. If you're looking for specifically employers that have already announced that they will accept OPT and CPT. You can go in, match employer preferences, and you can also go to work authorization and look for employers that have stated that they accept OPT and CPT. I would say don't limit yourself just to those employers. There are some employers who maybe don't announce that they accept OPT, CPT, but they may be willing to consider it anyway. So anyway, that's just a few of the things you can do with Handshake. So again, if you need additional assistance exploring Handshake and how to use it, or if you want more tips and strategies for your job search, please come see a career coach. And the career coaches at the main career center on campus are here for you, whether you're a student or alumni. We do meet with recent graduates up to 12 months after they've graduated. And we also meet with alumni, 5 years out, 10 years out as well. So please feel free to reach out, and we look forward to helping you out. So I'll turn it over to Megan to talk about the additional key websites.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be discussing My Visa Jobs and going global. My Visa Jobs is a similar tool as the employment maps. So as Karen mentioned, it's really important to have a variety of resources that you're pulling your strategy from. And My Visa Jobs is another tool that you can get some information about employers that have historically sponsored H1Bs. I can go ahead and share my screen, Grace, if you wouldn't mind, so I can kind of just show y'all through this resource. So H1B Report is going to be the place that you're going to find most. Oh, no, I don't want that. We're going to find a lot of information regarding historical employers that have not only filed for H1B, but have been successful in securing H1B for their employees. As you're looking at these different employers, ones that stand out to you, I'd recommend that you click on that employer because it has a variety of additional information, even as much information for you to know who their immigration attorney is. And they also have information. I think something that's really helpful here is seeing the quantity of these filings that the employers have done over the last year. You can see here with 2021, they don't have all of the additional information because the lottery has not been selected yet. But you can see here, which ones have been denied based off out of the ones that they have filed. And then you can click on the filed applications. And then this is a really awesome place where you can identify what are the job titles that are most likely to be pulled for sponsorship. So you can actually look at what these different titles are, and this can give you a sense in, what are the types of roles and functional roles that you might want to target based off of the success rate of H1B sponsorship. You can get even, going back here, you can even, search through industry and seeing, what industries have the highest level of H1B sponsorship applications. And so this can also give you some insights into different industries that you might want to target if H1B conversion is, top on your priority list when it comes to your job search. So this is a really awesome tool that I refer students to, very frequently for them to strategize their job search based off of H1B sponsorship conversion. The other tool that I am just going to kind of briefly go over, which I think is really important for folks that maybe are considering a plan B, as I think it's really important right now. As Karen mentioned, it's a very competitive job market. And so if you're interested in, different jobs, perhaps abroad that have multinational presence, those are another good option, right? Like you can, perhaps work in other countries around the world for a couple years and get transferred back to the States if there's a presence in the United States with that employer. on like an L1 visa, or I think an internal visa. So that could be another option for you in thinking about what other backup plans are, because the lottery, I mean, H1B sponsorship, it doesn't necessarily even guarantee that you get that visa. There's still a lottery process. And so we've had various alums who have successfully found employers that put in their H1B sponsorship applications and then ultimately don't get chosen within the lottery. And if they're not with a multinational employer, they're terminated. If there is presence in other markets, then it's just as easy for them to be transferred, do a year, and then get transferred back to the States on a different visa. So my visa jobs, I don't have it pulled up. Let's see, I'm gonna do Handshake. Handshake, like Karen mentioned, has a direct link where you can get to my visa jobs. There's a subscription, so it's going to be helpful for you to be able to use the tool without having to pay for it. So this is where you'll be able to find that resource. Let's see, did I pass it? Yes, I did. So this is a really awesome resource for international job seekers. So if you're looking at, other employers beyond the States, this is where you'll be able to find some resume guides, job boards, and other resources for an international job search. And I think that's all I have.
All right, I'm up next. So I'm going to give you a brief overview on OPT and CPT, which are the two main work authorizations for F1 students. Both of these topics are workshops in themselves, so I'm just going to kind of go over the basics. But feel free to put any questions in the chat and we can try to answer them at the end. So F1 CPT, or curricular practical training, gives students an up-to-date I-20 that authorizes them to work off campus for paid positions for a specific employer for specific dates. So for example, say you get an internship from June 15th to August 25th. And CPT is for before graduation. So since it is date and employer specific, that means you get the job offer first and then you apply for CPT. The job offer is a required document for the CPT I-20 request. Excuse me, sorry. So one thing to kind of keep in mind, since this session is kind of focused on how to explain, your work authorization status to employers, be aware of what the job offer letter requirements are, at the time that you get the offer, even before, because if the offer letter does not have everything that we need, you'd have to then go back to them and say, oh, can you add this? So it's good to be aware ahead of time. And we have templates on our website that you can provide to the employers, or you can, adapt yourself. Because some employers have their own template, and that's fine, but they do need to be aware of what we need on the letter in order us to issue the I-20. So that's one piece of advice I would give you. Another question that often comes up is about the Social Security number. So CPT does make you eligible for the SSN. You do not need the SSN to start working. You just need the CPT. If the SSN is in process, when you start working, that's okay. And that's definitely something that's come up a lot over the last year, since maybe Social Security offices are closed or it takes a long time to get an appointment. So that's something else you can communicate with employers if maybe they don't do much CPT. Just let them know that once you have the CPT, you are authorized to start working. And then once you have the Social Security number, you will give that to them. Okay. CPT is authorized on a quarter by quarter basis. So this does mean that the dates of the job must fall within the dates of the quarter in which you're applying for CPT. You also must receive credit for the job or the internship in order to qualify for CPT. So that means you must enroll in a course in your department during the term you're working for the company. So usually for undergrads, it's a 190 course, 190 something. And for grads, typically it's 290, but it can be different depending on the department. And there's also for graduate students in the summer, there's a summer cooperative education program that does not require enrollment as long as you are a continuing student into the fall. So it's something you can get more information on our website. And then it is possible for CPTs to span multiple quarters, but you must apply for CPT for each quarter and be receiving credit for the CPT job for each quarter. So say you have that summer internship with Facebook and then they want to continue into the fall, that's fine. You just have to apply for fall CPT and be enrolled in a course that gives you credit in the fall. Okay, for OPT, F1 OPT, optional practical training, is employment authorization to work in your field of study off campus, and it can be paid or unpaid. So the key there, actually, I want you to remember is that it's to work in your field of study. It doesn't matter if it's paid, unpaid, part-time, full-time, all of the above. It just has to be related to your major. It can be used before or after graduation, but typically it's for after. We encourage students as much as possible to use CPT before graduation. But if it's not an option, technically you can apply for OPT to work before you graduate. You're eligible for 12 months of OPT per degree level. And then you may be eligible for 2 STEM OPT extensions. Each STEM OPT extension is an additional 2 years of OPT. So 3 years total. And then you can, for example, if you get a bachelor's and do, OPT and STEM OPT and then go on to get a master's or PhD, you could then do OPT and STEM OPT again. OPT is approved by USCIS, and it does not require sponsorship by your employer. And you do not need a job offer at the time of the application. In fact, most students do not have one. And that's partly because OPT does take typically 3 to 4 months before USCIS approves it. So it's something that you apply for, unlike CPT, which is employer specific, right? OPT you apply for towards the end of your program at UCSD. And then you can kind of be looking for a job while it's pending. And then once it's approved, you can start working. Okay, STEM OPT, which I mentioned, is a 2-year extension of your initial 12 months of OPT. And you can apply twice if your second STEM OPT extension is based on a higher degree level. So again, in that example I gave, if you went bachelor's to master's or master's to PhD. Okay, so you're eligible if the zip code on your I-20 is on the STEM designated degree program list. And I can put this link in the chat too. So the zip code is I believe, 6-digit number on the first page of your I-20 next to where your major is written out. And if that number is on this link, that means you're eligible for the STEM OPT extension. Typically it's science, technology, engineering, math majors, but you do have to make sure that that zip code is on the list. And for STEM OPT, unlike regular OPT, you must have a current employer or a job offer at the time of application. Employment must be paid and it must be at least 20 hours a week. And the employer must be registered with what's called E-Verify. So there are a little bit more requirements for STEM OPT and requirements of the employer, but one thing to keep in mind, if you're on OPT and are working for a company and want to apply for STEM OPT, you can explain to them it's still not sponsorship. They do not have to pay anything. They don't have to do anything other than obviously employ you, but also there is an I-983 training plan that is required for us to issue the STEM OPT I-20, and it's a 4-page training plan that you and your employer fill out that just has basic information about you and the employer, and then basically your kind of goals and objectives for that position. But other than that, yeah, it's not sponsorship. They don't have to do anything except fill out and sign that form. Okay, so I think that was my overview for you of OPT, CPT, and STEM OPT. I will mention, I guess, briefly for J1 students, your authorization is different. It's called academic training, if there happen to be any J1s here. And then now I will turn it over to Andres for a little bit more immigration overview.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. So yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm an immigration attorney. So I help people with various immigration benefits like green card and work authorization and things like that. So I just wanted to give a basic immigration law overview. We're in this webinar, we're mainly talking about OPT and that type of thing. But it's good to know generally what are the options to stay here, to live in the U.S. Permanently or temporarily. So there's basically three main categories within the immigration law. People can get visas and work permits and green cards through employment, or through family, or for humanitarian reasons. And student visas are kind of within the employment, professional category. So, and also there are temporary visas and temporary things, and there are permanent things. So, like H1B is temporary, it's not forever. OPT is temporary. But lawful permanent residence, that's permanent. That means someone can live here forever. So, that's another difference. And there's those distinctions are applicable in all of the categories. So in employment, for example, one option that people have is people who graduate from college. They might be able to get an H1B, like Megan mentioned. It's a H1B employment visa that allows them to work here, and so that's one temporary type of visa or status. And there are others. There's like the O1 for artists of extraordinary ability. People who work for a company in another country and then get transferred here. There's a lot of different employment categories. The main thing to keep in mind is are connected to the. So let's say you have a job and you're working and maybe you have OPT or something, and then maybe they really like you. Well, then you can start talking about the H1B or something for them to help you to keep working for them. And usually, the big companies, they already have an immigration attorney that helps with all of these processes. So smaller companies might not. Smaller companies might not really know very much about immigration. So sometimes, you have to educate them, and it's also good if you are trying to get a H1B or a green card through an employer to speak to an immigration lawyer one-on-one. There are a lot of private immigration attorneys that can offer consultations. Some are free, some charge. I generally advise to do the ones that charge you because you're paying for them to give you advice. If it's free, they might not really give you much information. They might just want you to hire them. All right, so employment, like I said, those are the different categories. There's also people can also get a green card through employment, so the employer can sponsor them to get a green card. Green card is lawful permanent residence. We call it a green card because the card is green. And then so that's the employment, and the other common way that people get status here in the U.S. is through family. The most common, obviously, and everyone knows this, is marriage. A real marriage, not fake marriage, obviously. But yeah, a lot of people who are in the U.S. they meet someone, they fall in love, they get married, and if that person is a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, then oftentimes, the immigrant or the person can get a green card through that marriage. But yeah, it has to be a real relationship. They're going to want evidence of the relationship. So that's a common way. Other ways through family are, for example, let's say your parents are U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents, then maybe they can help you to get permanent residence or citizenship. Or even less common for students, but if you have a child who's a U.S. citizen, once that child is 21 years old, they can help you. But, I don't think many people here have kids who are 21 years old. There are other family categories also, like, for example, sibling. If you have a brother or sister who is a U.S. citizen, they can petition for you to get a green card. It does take a long time, but it could be a possibility. And those are the permanent ways through family. There are also temporary ways. So let's say your parents let's say your parent, one of your parents gets a H1B visa and you are under 21, then they can include you in that. Or if your parents get some other type of visa, if you're under 21, they can include you. So that's family. And then humanitarian ways are, there's different humanitarian ways to get status here. For example, asylum. So if you are afraid of returning to your home country because you'll be in danger, you feel that the government will persecute you because of your race, religion, social group, political opinion, then you might be able to get asylum, which is a way to stay here. Other humanitarian ways are the U visa for victims of serious crimes. So if you are ever the victim of a serious crime in the United States, then and you cooperate with the police or the authorities, then you might be able to get work authorization and eventually lawful permanent residence. And the government created this because they noticed that a lot of people who don't have citizenship sometimes are afraid to report crimes because they don't want to get deported. So this is a way to encourage them. So so if that's another way. Also, VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. It's for men or women, but if you were the victim of domestic violence by a spouse or a parent or a child who is a lawful permanent resident or U.S. citizen, then you could get permanent residence that way. And there are some other humanitarian ones that probably aren't relevant for all of you, but there's DACA for people who entered the U.S. before they were 16 and are undocumented. And there's the T visa for victims of human trafficking. If you were brought to the U.S. and forced to work against your will, labor trafficking, sexual trafficking, that sort of thing, you could get work authorization and maybe permanent residence. But yeah, those are the main humanitarian ways. So whenever you think about ways, if you want to stay here, you just kind of break it down into those three categories. And there's a lot of information on the USCIS website, so I'll put a link in the chat. That's the organization that grants most of these benefits. So they have some information on their page, and there's other information out there on the internet as well, obviously. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a general overview. So with that, I guess I'll move on. Yeah.
Thanks, Andres. Okay, so now we have put together a panel Q&A. So like I said, we kind of pulled the top 5 questions that we commonly get. And then we'll have a section at the end for some live Q&A. So our first question for our panel is, how should students answer questions related to work authorization and/or sponsorship?
So I can go first, I guess. So, and kind of some variations of the questions you might get are you authorized to work in the US? Or do you require sponsorship? Do you require sponsorship now or in the future? So these are all questions that might show up on applications, maybe in an interview. So I would just say be prepared for these questions. And the way to be prepared is to understand your status, right? So if you're a current student applying for an internship, you're going to most likely be applying for CPT. So be able to kind of maybe inform the employer of what that requires of them and what it doesn't require of them. And then just as much as possible, just, be honest with your answers. Sometimes these questions are tricky, but just answer them to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I can follow up on that and say, if you're not clear on what exactly the employer is asking or why they're asking it, you can reach out to the HR contact for clarification, just to understand, what really are they asking and how you should answer. But in general, if you have a student visa that allows you to be eligible for work authorization in the US, then you can say, yes, you are authorized to work in the US. And if it's just a temporary work authorization, yes, you're going to need sponsorship at some point in the future.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that with Karen, is just to be really, really careful when you're reading these questions and really dissecting like how they're asking the question in order to answer as honestly as possible, without, you know, potentially putting yourself at a disservice or potentially being screened out. And so, yeah, like Karen mentioned, asking HR, like, you know, or asking other folks through like informational interviewing prior to applying on whether or not their employer sponsors can be really helpful for you to identify like how they might be using that question in the application forms.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. And I just wanted to add too, you know, sometimes maybe you don't really want to be here forever. You just want to work a little bit on OPT or something. So maybe you don't need sponsorship. You have work authorization, or but you don't necessarily require sponsorship. You know, or maybe you don't know if you would need sponsorship. So that's something to think about also. You know, sponsorship, generally they mean like, you know, do you want them to help you with the H1B or something? And one thing I like to say to students is, you know, once maybe like, let's say you start working for a company, once they hire you work and they like you, well, maybe that's where you bring up sponsorship, and, you know, after they get to know you.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Okay, so our next question is, what kinds of questions is it okay for prospective employers to ask about visa and work authorization status? And when can they ask? Can they not hire me depending on how I answer these questions?
I guess I can start with that one. So employers can't ask questions related to a candidate's national origin or race. These are things that they can't discriminate against candidates. They can ask you about work authorization, though, if you are authorized to work in the US. And they can also inform you that you will be required to verify your identity and verify your work authorization if you're hired. That doesn't mean that employers don't ask questions about visa status and, you know, immigration or, you know, country of origin, things like that, but they're not supposed to.
Yeah, and I would just add on that sometimes, you know, it's obviously you want to be honest, like we've mentioned before, be as honest as you can, because sometimes, you know, these work authorizations that you have are only temporary; they're not permanent. So you know, you want to make sure the employer is aware of that. You don't want to mislead them on that.
Yeah, and I don't really have anything to add other than to say if you're not sure how to answer a question, feel free to reach out to, you know, ISPO or one of the career offices or immigration attorney, you know, someone like one of us. But I also think, like I think Karen said earlier, like talking to the HR as well to find out, you know, what exactly they're asking. They would probably know best, but we can definitely, if you're unsure, feel free to reach out.
My fellow panelists did a great job. I don't have anything to add.
Got a good crew here. All right, our next question is, how can I educate employers about the process of hiring international students?
So yeah, I would say the same thing that I said earlier, be prepared. So understand your different options, CPT or OPT, and be able to make it as easy for them as possible, right? Like some of these employers may be very familiar with OPT or CPT, but some may not. And so to be prepared ahead of time, I think, you know, you'll come across it obviously as very thorough and very prepared. So yeah, review our website on OPT, CPT, meet with us, meet with the Career Center, so that all of that is something that you don't have to worry about as much, and that they can really focus on why you are a good candidate for the job.
Yeah, I agree. Really emphasizing how you would benefit the organization, focus on the value that you're going to bring to the organization, and then also give them some potential solutions. Like maybe you could offer to connect them with an immigration attorney who can talk them through the process. Or if you are knowledgeable enough on the, from ISPO's website or from talking with an international student advisor, that you can just kind of generally give them some a better understanding of CPT and OPT and how that works. But really, again, focusing on the value that you're going to bring to that organization, and then providing potential solutions for how they can hire you and how easy it is.
Yeah, I would just echo all of that. I think there are a lot of employers that are really uneducated and don't understand how easy it can be to hire international students. And so I think it is really important that you make that very clear, and really emphasizing the work authorization that you do have, and how and how little requirement they have to put a lot of that legwork in. I think providing documentation and things like that can be really helpful too, and really kind of proving that with any additional materials that you can find through ISPO.
Yeah, same as everyone says, and I would just add, treat it like any other question in the job application, so you're trying to convince them to hire you. So this is just another question that you have to answer.
Great. Okay, so our next question is, what types of employers or roles will be most likely to hire or sponsor international students?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the websites and resources we highlighted earlier are good places to start, because they actually answer that question. And then I would probably defer to the careers that could probably assist you even more with the job search.
I'd say, identify the employers that have a history of sponsoring H1B visas. So like Megan was talking about earlier with Going Global's website and myvisajobs.com. So you can search and see which employers have historically hired international applicants and sponsored their visa. ISPO's map, alumni employer map is a great way, great resource as well. And then just talking with UCSD alumni and see, where are our international alumni working? Follow them, follow their footsteps. Don't try to blaze your own trail. And that's my advice.
Yeah, in addition to that, I will say a pattern that I see a lot when I am sifting through my visa jobs and seeing what kinds of roles are most likely to convert to an H1B sponsor. They tend to be technical roles. I think there are some specific requirements within the application where employers have to prove that this person is really the unicorn, right? Is the only person who can do it, and there isn't, a US domestic person to be able to do that stuff. So there's like a pie chart on my visa jobs, and I want to say 70% of the pie chart is filled with IT careers. There's another small sliver of engineering, and then, the rest is kind of just varied. So you will see that there is a trend for more technical roles to, one, be sponsored by the employer, and then two, actually get the lottery.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything to add.
All right, and then I think this is our last prepared question, and then I've already seen some good questions come through the chat, so we'll be sure to get to those. But our question reads, what should I do if I get OPT, but then I can't find a job?
So like I mentioned earlier, the main requirement for OPT employment is that it be related to your degree. But unpaid and volunteer work do count as long as they are related to your degree. And then The other piece that I think I might not have mentioned earlier is that during your initial 12 months of OPT, you are allowed 90 days of unemployment. But what I just mentioned, volunteering or unpaid internships in your degree do not count as unemployment. So one strategy you can do to not reach those 90 days of unemployment is to take an unpaid position or do some part-time volunteer work in your field of study, and at the same time look for a full job, if that's your goal. You just have to keep in mind that anything you do must be related to your degree to count for employment, and then you cannot go over the 90 days of unemployment.
I'll add something. I'll just say plan ahead. It's very, very important that you plan ahead. The job market is very competitive. So start your search early, very, very early. Let's say, 9 months or more before you're going to graduate, you're looking for a job and you're actively applying for jobs. Even before that, you're networking, from the time you arrive at UCSD, whether you're, freshman or transferring in as a junior, that you're networking with, other students who are in your department. You're talking with your professors and staff. You're reaching out to UCSD alumni who work in your desired field, building up your network that way, so that by the time you are ready to find a job, whether it's a summer internship or a job after you graduate, that you have something lined up. And so really planning ahead is kind of the way to better prepare yourself for finding a job when you're eligible for OPT.
Yeah, I'd like to just reiterate that planning ahead is really important. Meeting with a career coach well before, your unemployment days are counting down, and really coming up with a plan and a strategy on how you can best position yourself to secure employment. Being an international student is not an excuse for not getting employment. A lot of international students get employment. So if I was your career coach, I would challenge you in why you haven't secured a job. Is it kind of the frequency, time management? A lot of those things tend to kind of come into play when it comes to why, you're kind of scrambling at the very end. So definitely want to co-sign what Karen said about meeting with a career coach early, really starting this stuff early. And then back to what I had said prior of having a plan B, I think is really important because, you're not always going to get everything you want out of a job or your first job search. So I think having alternative, plans in terms of a temporary job, doing a contract role just to kind of pause your unemployment. That's, a good strategy while you continue to find something more, full-time and long-term. But then also having, alternative options even beyond that. So I would say, coming up with alternative plans can help that not be as panic induced as it can be for some students.
Yeah, and I would just add that, volunteering, like you all mentioned, is really big and a way to get your foot in the door. So if you could find a volunteer opportunity, that could be the solution, and it could also be a pathway to a job.
Awesome. So now we'll transition into our open question and answer, but we've already had some really good questions come through the chat. So I'll go ahead and read off our first question. So our first question is, and I think this relates back to our first panel question. So in my experience, the questions on these applications are either yes or no without the capability of explaining. How would I go about elaborating around this?
Yeah, I would say get savvy. There can be some fields that perhaps, in a cover letter, you could perhaps kind of mention the fact that you have work authorization for 12 months, or if you have STEM OPT for beyond. That can be a good way to put it. You could even put it on your resume if you need to kind of elaborate a little bit further in other places within your application. I would say beyond that, like reaching out to someone like HR and providing, that context, or asking where in the application they would recommend that you supply that context, can be ways around it. But unfortunately, if it is just a yes or no field, you'll have to choose at least what yes or no. And so I think at that point, it's really important to dissect the question and then maybe consult with a career coach or ISPO to, best identify which you would fall into, either the yes or the no category.
I agree with that. And I would say it's also incredibly valuable to connect with people who work in this company, and especially people who are maybe on the hiring committee or, in the team that they're hiring for. So you can have informational interviews so they can get to know you ahead of time, before you're even applying for this job, that they know who you are, they know your name, they know a little bit of information about you. And so having that connection can increase your chances of them helping you out with these types of questions, that, they understand your situation and they may be willing to kind of work with you on that. So just having that network established before you're applying to these jobs can be incredibly valuable.
All right, so our next question reads, when do international students normally start their after graduation OPT request?
Yeah, so on our website, opt.ucsd.edu, we have a timeline, but basically the earliest you can apply is 90 days before your program end date. And your program end date is typically the final day of the quarter. So 90 days before and up to 60 days after. It is recommended to apply on the earlier side, since it does take USCIS, 3 to 4 months to get to approve usually. But yeah, that's your window to apply.
Awesome. All right, so our next question reads, how do we determine whether or not a job falls under our field of study? Since certain positions might fall under a gray area. What will USCIS do if the job does fall under the gray area?
So I can say like kind of what the requirements are as far as reporting goes. So once you're approved for OPT, you get access to what's called the SCVP portal, which is the Student Exchange Visitor Program portal. And that's where you directly report your OPT employment. And what is required for you to report is the company name, address, whether it's part-time, full-time, your job title, your employment dates, and then there's, a text box for, 300 or 400 characters or something, to explain how it's related to your major. So yeah, we get this question all the time. I usually tell students to think about how your courses at UCSD and your major prepared you for this type of work. Like, your major best. If you feel pretty confident explaining that, it should be fine. If you know it's a stretch, it's probably a stretch, right? And you might want to rethink that position. And then, yeah, I definitely, refer you guys to the career offices to help you find positions that other people in your major may have found. I think probably looking for, if the job application requires someone with your major, obviously that's probably a very good sign. But again, your major best. So just try to think, what kind of things your major classes prepared you for.
Another thing you can do is kind of like what Emily was saying, is looking at the job description and seeing what degrees are required. Looking at that list. Also talking with other students or alumni, former students from your department, to find out what have they done with their degree. And so that's another, and also on Handshake, looking up employers and what types of degrees they look for. So there's different search strategies, and I wouldn't limit yourself to just one. Definitely talking with alumni, looking at what employers are asking, looking at the job description, and trying to get a sense of, is your degree related to the job that you want to do?
I'll just add on to this just a bit that university degrees are really built to be like multidisciplinary these days. Like you're taking a lot of, prerequisite classes, you have a lot of electives. So you can really, create a lot of agency when it comes to finding where those parallels are, and come up with a really great case, typically. Just kind of a little caveat there, but I've seen a lot of stretched students being able to, secure employment. That's not necessarily their major requirement, but there's a lot of skills that they've developed within just school generally that do transfer and translate into that job. So I think there's a lot of ways to be able to make a good case.
Great. Okay, so our next question is, should I mention, the period of my work authorization is limited to the employers during the interview?
I would say that, I mean, some things to keep in mind. Like, let's say they hire you a full-time job and they think you're going to be with them for years, but after they hire you, it turns out you can only work there for a year, and then you have to go back to your country. They might not like that. So one thing is, thinking about the future. Do you want a good letter of recommendation and from that employer, that kind of thing. So I think it depends on, if they ask, you have to tell the truth, right? So, yeah. But I think every case is different.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't use the word limited, maybe, just more explain, like I said, being like understanding your status and your work authorization, being able to explain it to them, I think comes across better than maybe thinking of it as a negative. It's just more about being open and honest so that they are prepared.
I'll say that employers don't like surprises, so it's better to be upfront with them and let them know. Your work authorization is for a specific period of time, and if if you work for that period of time and they really like you and they want to extend, that they already have some ideas in place on how, what are the options for you to continue working in the US after that initial 12 months.
Yeah, my recommendation here is back to like something Karen said of like really focusing the interview on like your value add into the organization. And like, I say, don't bring it up unless you're asked about it. But if you're asked about it, obviously be honest and try to prep them and come up with ideas. The reason why I say don't bring it up in an interview unless it's brought up is because as an interviewee, you're in the vulnerable seat, right? You're trying to like persuade this person that hiring you is in their best interest. And when the offer is made, I think that's when the inverse happens and there's a transition in power dynamics. And then at that point, if that hasn't been brought up, I think, you could be, a little bit more forthcoming and being like, I want to be transparent and let you know that, I have a cap to my work authorization. And I'd love to, discuss alternative options for me to stay longer term as I'm, very interested in your company and really am confident I can provide value beyond those 12 months.
Some good answers. All right, so we are reaching up time. So we'll probably end with this question. But our last question reads, with some graduate programs being shorter than others, what strategy would you recommend for international students in these programs looking for employment authorization here?
My recommendation is that if your program is shorter, that you should start your job search sooner. As it relates to just career advice, knowing that you have a smaller time being here, I think it should be even more imperative that you start networking as soon as possible and applying to jobs.
I I completely agree with that. I will just say I was in a 9-month master's program. It was intense, and I did not start searching for a job until after I graduated. Big mistake. The people who got jobs after that 9-month program were the ones who started networking and applying for jobs as soon as they got accepted to the master's program. So do start early.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. One thing I think I didn't mention, but typically for OPT and CPT, you do have to be enrolled for 1 academic year before you can do that. So usually that means you cannot do CPT in your first year. So if you were in a very short grad program, you might only be doing OPT. So I think what they're saying is good advice, because you won't have like a CPT internship to kind of have on your resume or to prepare you for a post-graduation job. But yeah, so starting that job search early, I think really makes sense in that case.
Yeah, just to echo off everyone, starting early, school is super important, but you also have to keep in mind other things like networking and getting a job.
All right, so I want to thank you everyone for some really good questions here. If there is a chance that we didn't get to your question, or you're pondering this great information and then a week later you're like, wait a minute, what about this? We have listed some really helpful contact information on the screen. So kind of like our go-to websites, as well as some email addresses if you want to reach out to us. So we more than welcome you to reach out to get some advice from any one of us. But with that is coming to the end of our time together today. Yes, awesome. So some of our panelists are dropping their contact information in the chat as well. So you can feel free to kind of copy that and save that for later too. And like I mentioned, this webinar will give us some time to edit it and upload it, but it will be available at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. So you can go ahead and reference that at a later date as well. So thank you everyone for spending some time with us. We hope that this was helpful for you, and as well as highlighted that you do have some good resources available to you as you engage in your job search. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.